Twists, let's dive in. At night, in the middle of a rainy storm, an ambulance is rushing a pregnant woman to the hospital. Afterward, the doctor informs her husband, Greg, that unfortunately his wife has passed away and they couldn't save her. However, they manage to save the baby, who survives. The doctor tells Greg that the baby has a genetic condition that prevents skin cells from pigmentation, making the skin extremely pale. Greg goes to see the baby, who is in an incubator for tests. The moment Greg sees the baby, he is shocked and deeply saddened. He declares that the baby cannot possibly be his and refuses to take him. 20 years later, a police officer named Doug is investigating the death of an elderly man on a farm. They tell him the man died of a heart attack. While searching the house, the police discover a basement and find a strange-looking boy hiding there, terrified and unwilling to come out. This raises Doug's suspicions, so he calls in a psychologist named Jessie to help. When Jessie arrives, she goes down to the basement and talks to the boy, reassuring him until he finally comes out. The boy, with his extremely pale skin, introduces himself as Jeremy, but says no one calls him by his name. They call him Powder because of his unusual skin color. Because of this, Powder has never left the house he lived in. When Jessie asks why he didn't call the police when his grandfather died, he explains that his grandfather always warned him to avoid people, saying that if anyone saw him, they would report him and take him away because of his strange skin. As a result, he spent his entire life hiding in the basement, building a large library to educate himself from the books there. He tells Jessie he has memorized every book in the library. Jessie tests him by picking a university-level book and asking him to read a specific page. She is astonished when he reads the first paragraph flawlessly. Jessie takes Powder outside the house, bringing him to a student shelter, as he is now under state care. When they arrive, the students stare at him, amazed by his appearance, having never seen anyone like him before. They mock him, but Powder picks up a spoon and holds it, attempting to balance it on the table. Suddenly, all the spoons in the room gather magnetically toward his spoon, leaving everyone in the cafeteria stunned and thinking he is some kind of strange supernatural being. Doug, meanwhile, goes home and finds his son Steve, who has come to visit his ailing mother suffering from a severe illness. It is evident that Doug and Steve have a strained relationship, as they pass each other without speaking. The doctor tells Doug that seeing Steve seemed to improve his wife's condition more than any medication. A few days later, Powder is in a physics class with his classmates. The teacher, Donald, demonstrates a device that generates electrical charges. When Donald activates the device, Powder becomes visibly uncomfortable and starts trembling violently. Suddenly, a bolt of electricity shoots out of the device, hitting Powder and causing him to levitate. He convulses as the students watch in horror. Donald tries to turn off the device, but it won't shut down, so he breaks it with a chair, causing Powder to fall to the ground, unconscious. Donald approaches to check if he is still alive, but when he touches him, he feels a strange sensation, and the hair on his arm stands up. Powder is taken to the hospital, and Donald explains what happened to the doctor. The doctor doesn't believe him, saying that such a jolt would have killed anyone, or at least left a mark. Donald tries to explain that Powder's body seems to process electricity, which is why he has no body hair, but the doctor dismisses him, thinking he's hallucinating. Powder tells Jessie that he can hear the thoughts of those around him, but she thinks he is delusional, attributing it to the shock he experienced. Powder leaves and heads toward his grandfather's old house, but on the way, he is intercepted by Doug and his colleague Duncan, who take him back to school. The school principal requests a meeting with Powder and informs him that his IQ test results are over 300, far surpassing the smartest person in the world. Despite this, Powder is indifferent and says he wants to return to his grandfather's house. Jessie explains that he cannot return because the bank has repossessed the property. The next day, Powder joins a camping trip with the students and Doug's assistant. At night, they gather around a fire, but Doug notices Powder sitting alone and goes to sit with him. As they talk, lightning strikes, and Powder tells Doug he can feel it throughout his body. He explains that when he sees lightning, he feels an electric current within him. He shares that his grandmother used to tell him he was divine, but he never believed her. He reveals that his mother was struck by lightning while pregnant with him, which explains his condition. The following day, while walking in the forest, Powder encounters two bullies, John and Mitch. For no reason, John points a rifle at Powder, saying he could kill him right then. They hear a gunshot nearby and rush to find Duncan trying to hunt a deer. Powder, upset, approaches the dying deer, feeling everything it is experiencing. He places one hand on the deer's neck and the other on Duncan's hand, transferring the deer's pain to Duncan. Duncan collapses, writhing in pain. John raises the rifle again, threatening to shoot Powder if he doesn't stop, but Powder remains unaffected, holding Duncan's hand. John pulls the trigger, but Mitch intervenes at the last moment, saving Powder. Powder is taken to Jesse, who becomes increasingly concerned about his mental state. She asks why he did what he did, but he ignores her question, saying he wants to return home. When she presses him, he becomes agitated, releasing an energy wave that shatters all the glass in the office. He tells her he cannot stay at the school much longer and leaves. Meanwhile, Doug returns home to find his wife's condition worsening. The doctor informs him that her illness is progressing, leaving Doug feeling helpless. His wife is unable to communicate how she feels. The next day, Powder is sitting alone in the cafeteria when Donald approaches, expressing admiration for his intelligence. Donald explains Einstein's theory that if a human could use 100% of their brain power, they might achieve supernatural abilities, suggesting this could explain Powder's condition. He moves closer and tries to touch him. And Powder touched him first because he couldn't believe that someone could do that. Afterward, Doug goes to his colleague's house after he resigns from his job and finds that he has removed all the weapons from his house. When Doug asks him why, Duncan says that when he killed the deer and Powder held his hand, he felt everything the deer felt as it was dying, as if he were the one losing life, not the deer. He says he has been killing animals for years and regrets all the pain he caused them. That's why he can no longer carry any weapon and resign from his job. Doug starts reminiscing about his wife, who is in a coma and unable to speak, and wonders if Powder could help heal her, or at least ease her pain and tell him how she feels. Indeed, Doug takes Powder to his house and asks him to help her. Powder sits beside her, places his hand on her head, and transfers all her thoughts to Doug. He tells Doug that she is clinging to life and doesn't want to die until she reassures him and ensures his relationship with their son, which is currently strained, is restored. She asks him to mend their relationship and make it good again, as it used to be. Doug hugs her and reassures her. She opens her eyes for the first time in a long while and cries because she knows Doug understood everything she had in her mind. That was the last time she opened her eyes. Later, Steve arrives at his mother's house to check on her. Doug hugs him as soon as he sees him, and Steve learns that his mother has passed away. Their relationship is restored, and they forget all the conflicts between them, all thanks to Powder. The next day, Jesse talks to Powder and tells him he's the most beautiful person she's ever met. She approaches him and kisses him, but her father sees them together and becomes concerned for his daughter. He confronts Powder harshly and hits him, telling him to stay away from her. Jesse intervenes to end the situation before it escalates. Powder returns to his residence, packs his bag, and decides to go back to his old home alone. As he's leaving, he hears a noise coming from the basketball court. Out of curiosity, he goes to watch. He finds John and his bullying friends playing there. John approaches him with his friends and starts bullying him. They hear thunder outside and see Powder frightened. They force him outside and strip John of his clothes, throwing him into a puddle of water. Powder is very upset by what they're doing to him. Then they hear thunder and lightning again. A chain from one of them gets lifted, and all the metal objects get drawn to Powder. He releases all the energy inside him, throwing them all to the ground. John falls and his heart stops due to the immense energy he was exposed to. Powder puts his clothes back on, approaches John, places his hand on his chest, and tries to save him. He emits charges from his hand to revive him from the shock until John's heart starts beating again. After saving John, Powder continues on his way, leaving them behind. When he arrives at his old house, he goes down to the basement and sits there alone. Jesse arrives at the house, knowing she would find him there. She enters the basement, apologizes to Powder, and tells him it's her fault for taking him away from his home and causing all this to happen to him. Donald, who came with her to help Powder escape the city, enters. As they step out, they find Doug and his colleague coming to arrest Powder. Jesse pleads with Doug to let him escape the city and live his life alone. Doug remembers the favor Powder did for him when he helped his wife and decides to let him go and not arrest him. However, Doug's colleague disagrees, saying Powder made mistakes and must be arrested. He refuses to let him run and chases after him to catch him. But lightning strikes Powder in the chest as he runs, giving him immense energy that allows him to run far away until he disappears from sight. Finally, he is free, feeling for the first time that no one controls him and that he is free forever. If you like the movie, don't forget to hit like and subscribe to the channel to stay updated with all our latest